Welcome to Gaun Yersoul.
And this is our podcast for Rites and Rituals Scotland.
I'm Lindy Irving.
I'm Victoria Burnham.
And we're here to talk about the magic of ceremony.
And the power of ritual.
And how we can weave spirituality into our lives.
And we promise there might be just a wee bit of Scottishness thrown in there as well.
So here we are.
Here we are.
Our first podcast. This is only slightly terrifying.
I know. We did actually just have a wee laugh there because we didn't even know which camera to look into. So
No, we have no idea what we're doing. So.
I'm over here. You're over there.
I wish we'd actually had everything set up about an hour ago. We've just spent the last hour in a wee cafe here in Glasgow and we spent about 2 minutes talking about ceremony and spirituality, and then we talked about men, relationships, sex, and everything in between. So who knows where this is going to go?
Absolutely right, because I was sitting there as we were chatting away thinking, this is a really good podcast that we're...
Well, bits of it anyway, bits of it anyway. But we're so delighted to be here and to be starting this podcast. Shall we start with a name? Gaun Yersoul?
Gaun Yersoul.
Because I think, for me, it captures rites and rituals in that we wanted it to be Scottish. We wanted it to be spiritual, but we wanted it to be fun. We didn't want it to take itself too seriously. And so, of the many names we come up with.
Well, I think that's the whole point, is the fact that the first thing that we kind of found out together is that we both like to have lots of fun. We never take ourselves too seriously. We take our work very seriously, but there's always an element of fun. And I think spirituality, the minute you throw that into the mix, people go, oh no, I'm not listening to that. That's shite.
It's too serious.
It's
got to be
too much.
Too serious.
So our name, Gaun Yersoul, which obviously Lindy is a brilliant linguist, and come up with a whole list of names which we threw about. But that one, I mean, if you're no Scottish, how do we explain Gaun Yersoul?
And that's a really good point, because we, the people who are drawn to our ceremony work, a lot of people come from outside of Scotland, particularly the US and Canada and Australia. So
the occasional English person.
And everybody's welcome. We love that people come to Scotland for ceremony.
Absolutely.
But if you're not Scottish, well, there's a phrase in Scotland, Gaun Yersoul. And if you were to translate it into English, it would just mean go you. Go you. So if you did something really well, you accomplished something, people might say to you,
I scored the winning goal.
Yeah, in England you'd say, oh, go you, that's great. Here in Scotland we would say, Gaun Yersoul. So it just means the same thing. But we wanted to put a wee spiritual slant on it, so we turned it into Gaun Yersoul. And as I say, we're really, really happy with that. So that's our name, but it's a Rites and Rituals podcast. And today is all about rites and rituals, what we are, who we are, how we came to it, what we're trying to achieve, and anything else that comes up.
Absolutely.
Over that time. And future podcasts are going to cover all sorts of different things, aren't they?
And you don't just have to look at our faces.
No.
We'll have lots of other people coming in, lots of guests, people who we're training with Rites and Rituals. They're going to be some of our first interviewees or people involved.
Yeah.
Guests. And also lots of people within the sort of environment of spirituality, and outside of that, even the couples that we're working with.
Yep.
Everybody is, going to be part of this new and rather exciting venture.
It is, because our target audience is for people who are interested in spirituality, in this modern world and how you can incorporate it into everyday life. People who are interested in ceremony and ritual, whether they are celebrants or they're having ceremony in some way, they've got a wedding coming up, they want to bless a wee baby that's coming into their lives. So we have quite a wide target audience, would that be right? And I think ceremony and ritual is so fascinating. Spirituality is so fascinating, and there's so much to look at and to discover, and it's as much a deepening for us as well, because we are not coming from the standpoint that we know everything about everything.
I mean, let's be honest,
we don't.
We know
nothing about anything. whether it be ceremony or whether it be spirituality, we're using these sessions as a way for us to explore what ceremony and ritual and spirituality mean to us and how they all come together. But rites and rituals.
So you tell me, where did it come from? Because a wee bit of quick background. I came into this work as a celebrant. I work as a celebrant, and I met Lindy originally through her training company, which was just a training company, CTS Scotland. And I found myself drawn to, I didn't even know why I was drawn to this work, but this woman, it was during COVID.
It was.
And she met me over Zoom, and I can tell you all the details about how I've decided to become a celebrant later. But basically, Lindy was already in this on this kind of, now there are, right, okay, red flag, here we go. There are words that we will use and we're not ashamed to use them. Those words are journey.
I fucking love the word journey.
Journey. We're on a journey. We're not going to do that, but we are on a journey. Energy. It's another one. Yep. So we do use these terms, and I know that some people go, oh, shut up about it.
Shut up, switching you off.
But Lindy has been on this journey quite a bit longer than I have. So let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah, and I would just caveat to that, we've all been on this journey since the minute we were born, but we can save that for another podcast. So we, as Victoria said, we're both celebrants or ceremonialists. And, well, there's a thing, that word celebrant and ceremonialist, because I use the two interchangeably. But I like the word ceremonialist better. It's a nicer word. It rolls off the tongue better. But also, for me, it's just a wee bit deeper. I think when you say the word celebrant, people automatically think of weddings or funerals. And if somebody's standing up there with a book, it's become maybe even a wee bit commercialised.
Well, I think that's the whole point, isn't it? Which is there was no in between. If you were a celebrant, then you just covered everything else we will get into all the other depths that the ministers couldn't do. So it was more like a business. And what we realised very quickly, that it is anything but that. There is so much depth in it. We're not just there ticking boxes for people.
Yeah, and I think the word celebrant is very much associated with celebration, which is fine. It's great. We do lots of lovely celebrations, no matter what the milestone is. But marking these transitions in people's lives is not just about celebrating. It's about honouring. It's about honouring the sacred. It's about helping them navigate this change that's happening in their life. So I often use the word ceremonialist just because I feel there's a wee bit more depth to it.
It's a gentler word, isn't it?
Yeah, it's gentler, yeah.
It feels deeper.
Yeah.
It took me a while to manage to say it. Ceremonialist. But now
Yeah, and we're not trying to be pompous.
No.
Again, we're not trying to pitch yourself above anybody else. It's just a nicer word. I like it. But, so, I have been a celebrant for the past 9 years. And I came to it because friends of mine were getting married and they said, look, we'd really like you to do our wedding because you like the sound of your own voice and we think you would do it really well. And I said, all right, let me look into that. I had absolutely no idea about anything within this field. And so I went and researched and I came across humanism and the Humanist Society of Scotland. And I recognised that was, at that time, what I found was the only way that you would be able to do it legally was if you were a humanist celebrant. Now, there were probably other groups at that time who did have authorisation to conduct legal marriages in Scotland, but that was the only one that I came across. And I thought, okay, I could do this without looking into what that meant, what humanism meant. I just thought that's a really nice word, and it sounds as if that's, we're all humanists in some way, which I think we are to a certain extent. And I think I even filled in the application form to the Humanist Society of Scotland, and then thought I better do some reading around this. And then when I read into their beliefs, because I think many of us hold many of the humanist values, to live a good life and to be good to each other when we're on this journey. But when I read about their beliefs, in that they don't believe in anything mysterious, anything supernatural, anything beyond this world. This is it. There's nobody else here but us. And when we're going. I realised that did not align with my own personal beliefs. And so I said to the couple, look, I can't do it legally. The only way I'd be able to do that would be you do the legal part separately and I'll do the celebration of your wedding. And that's the way we did it. And it was lovely. It was down in Maybe Forest in the Borders. And it was absolutely beautiful.
Didn't have a clue what you were doing, did you?
I had no idea. You're going to bring up the hand fasting.
I am going to bring up the hand
fasting. Oh, no. Yeah, no, I mean, it happened and I would never hide from anything. I did a hand fasting ceremony. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and there were 6 ribbons tied around this beautiful couple.
If you don't know what hand fasting, we will cover this later
we
on.
We'll be covering
podcasts.
all the rituals.
But think Outlander, hills, binding hands together with your clans, all that beautiful, beautiful depth.
And binding for all time.
Binding for all time. So you were tying.
The whole point is you bind them. Often couples now want to actually tie the knot, so they physically tie a knot, and the idea is that it never gets untied because the commitment they've made to each other is somehow embedded within those fibres. It's such a beautiful Scottish ritual. But what did Lindy do? 6 people come up and tied ribbons around their hands, and Lindy thought, oh, how do I get these off? Because they were all tied really tight. So I am absolutely ashamed to say I got a pair of scissors and cut them off.
It's a beautiful sacred moment.
They are still married. They are very much still married, but just shows you how little I knew about beautiful Scottish customs 9 years ago. But anyway, that set me on a whole new path. Because it was so joyful, it was so lovely to be a part of that and to see everybody so full of hope for this couple and for their life together, and that was just the starting point, and I just absolutely loved it. And of course afterwards, lots of really lovely people saying, oh, that was really nice, and it was your first ceremony and you should do this, as people often do. But I did think, oh my God, I would love to be able to do this. I would love to be able to do this. And so I decided just to pack in my job. I was lecturing through at Edinburgh College, packed in my job and just jumped right into celebrancy. So I trained and I was very fortunate. It just kind of took off straight away. I started to do funeral ceremonies, which I absolutely was so honoured to be a part of this journey for people. And then I started to do weddings. At that time, I couldn't do them legally, but I would still... It's the way it's done down in England.
Yeah.
So although we celebrants up here in Scotland can conduct legal marriages, and we'll talk about that, how it all works in another podcast.
Yeah. Only some celebrants can.
Some celebrants, you're absolutely right. Not all celebrants, but some celebrants. But down in England, they do it. And, they go and visit the registrar and then they have the wedding celebrations separately. And so that's what I was doing for a couple of years. And then I was always drawn back to this that I had found very early on. It was called the Interfaith Foundation. And I was drawn to their work because of the spiritual aspects of it. The videos I would watch, you would see people being blessed. There was lots of candles. It was all done very beautifully.
We like a candle.
We do like a candle. And I was really drawn to that side of it, the mystery of it. There seemed to be something a lot deeper happening here than just training to be a celebrant, which I'd already done. And so in 2017, I took the leap and I did 2 years with the One Spirit Interfaith Foundation, which is really like a 2-year spiritual course.
And what sort of people are attracted to that kind of environment?
That's a really good question, because we'd said at the start that when you say that word spiritual, it can put a lot of people off. Yeah. It can be very kumbaya and airy-fairy and all that.
Tie-dyes.
Tie-dyes.
I do like a tie-dye, though.
And I remember on the very first day of our training, so it was over the course of 2 years, you went to London once a month for a weekend and you learned about all the different religions, because it's interfaith, so you learned about all the different religions and the belief in and the mysticism within them. And then after the 2 years, you were ordained as a One Spirit minister. And with that, if you practice in Scotland, if you choose to be a celebrant, and not everybody does, some people go on to be spiritual guides or spiritual teachers. Some people do dance, they explore the sacred through dance or through music. So it's really about what's inside you and what you're drawn to. I was already a ceremonialist and wanted to continue that. And so that gave me authorisation to conduct legal marriages in Scotland, which just gave that wee bit extra depth to what I was doing. But on the very first day of our training, I had no idea what I was going to. No idea. And there is that question, is this a cult?
Yes.
Is it a cult? Especially when you're sitting in a room, there was 30 of us. And there were people in tie-dye and kaftans and, long flowing clothes and people that I would say looked spiritual.
So you felt intimidated a little?
Well, I was sitting there in my Batman T-shirt.
Obviously.
And I was thinking, right, is it a cult? And then everybody had to introduce themselves, and there would be a lot of people who would do that thing. So tell me a bit about you, and they would go, wow. And I started to think, oh shit, this is a cult.
It's just because knowing your background, you're a lassie for Ayrshire.
I am.
Just like me. And all of that is an alien world to us. And there's part of us that want desperately to be part of it, but we're also afraid because we've been brought up in an environment where things like religion and all that kind of deep stuff is a little bit, I don't know where I belong and I don't know if I should belong.
Yeah, and that's almost too weird. And we're weird. We are weird.
We are
and
weird.
I embrace my weirdness. But the great thing was that's okay if you're like that, if you wear kaftans and you talk slow and you can, because what they're doing, they're considering. You've asked me a question, I'm taking time to consider my answer rather than just blurting it out, which is brilliant. But what I learned through the course of those 2 years, because I remember early on saying to my supervisor, I'm really worried I'm not spiritual enough for this course.
Absolutely.
Because everybody else seems to be much more spiritual than me. And she was great and she helped me to see that spirituality is not about how you look or how you sound. Spirituality is about just being yourself, being your authentic self, and where you are at in your journey at this point. So who knows, by the time I get to 80, maybe I will be doing that.
No, I'll not let you.
Maybe I will be wearing tie-dye. Who knows? It's all welcome. But I do remember thinking, oh my goodness, if I joined a cult. And it actually was one of the best things I've done. It transformed me over the course of those 2 years.
And it gave you confidence in allowing yourself to become more spiritual and open and not feel like you're being judged. And that's a huge issue, I think.
And no care if people are judging me. And I would never have used the word God in anything but a kind of negative context, because my understanding of God was a man that sits in a cloud and takes notes about everybody, how they're living their life, and judges them and then decides what's going to happen to them in the afterlife. And I could never connect with the idea of that, and the idea of a God that could give wee babies cancer or and if you had it, it was because you were doing something wrong, you weren't praying enough, you weren't pious enough, whatever. And so I really couldn't connect with that. But over those 2 years, I came to see God as not as any somebody that's got form, but as a central symbol of meaning. And I was very comfortable, and I'm very comfortable with using the word God now.
See, it's interesting because but I still find it really difficult to say God.
Yeah, and that's okay.
I say spirit or the divine or sacred. God to me just it you see it actually makes me feel uncomfortable, and it shouldn't, because I'm not afraid or I'm not all embracing of that. I just find it, I don't know, I just find it a little bit it's too heavy.
And
it's
that's
too
okay.
heavy,
Yeah, I think that that's where you're at, and that's absolutely okay, because I remember being there. But
also I think if I say God, somebody's going to judge me, and I need to get out of my own head because of that.
And that's interesting in ceremony, and I will always ask my couples and my families, whoever I'm working with, are you comfortable with this language? Can I say the word God, or would you rather me allude to what it is we're trying to say in another way?
Because I even have changed when I work mainly in the funeral industry at the moment as a funeral celebrant, as well as doing wedding ceremonies. But some of the words that I use, some of the poems that we pick up and we use during ceremony, I'll actually change the wording slightly because, and it's not necessarily because I don't think my families would be comfortable, but maybe I wouldn't want to stand up in front of 100 and odd people and say something that doesn't really land. But the spirituality is still there. So there's a poem, and I think it's the line in it is, "It's all a part of the master's plan."
Yes.
A step on the road to home.
A step on the road to home.
I now say...
Oh, I love that.
I know, it's a lovely poem.
I don't like the master.
I always say it's now a part of a greater plan.
Yes, yeah,
a step
that's
on the
lovely.
road to home.
That's lovely.
And I think that's the master and the God thing. It seems all, what did you say? Like all empowering, like you're being judged. And I think to soften that feeling that there is something greater, there is something more but a beautiful beginning after all of this.
But no, this omnipotent character.
Yes, this master.
Yeah.
Who is making decisions.
Yeah. The only caveat I would put to that is we're very much led by our families.
Yeah.
So if they say they like that language, the master's plan, then I am absolutely 100% behind it.
And of course, I'll absolutely do prayers, and because I believe that their beliefs are my beliefs.
Yeah,
you know.
Exactly. We hold that space for what they need.
Exactly.
So I then, after training as an interfaith minister, and I was ordained and became Reverend me.
Rev Lindy.
Rev Lindy, wee lassie born in Ayrshire, born in Misblown in Ayrshire, became Rev Lindy. And I did embrace that for a while. I felt less and less connected with it as the time has gone on, I have to be honest. And there were parts of it that I kind of felt disconnected to, because I'm less interested in the actual religious parts of it. Mm-hmm. I'm much more interested in the mysticism and the idea that at the heart of every religion is the same thing, that we all feel connected to something bigger than ourselves. And some people will call it God, and some people will call it Allah.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Why can't people? This is the big question, isn't it? I mean, for centuries, why can't people just accept that? Why do we have to name something and put us in a pocket? And if you don't belong to that pocket of belief, then you are lesser than another.
Well, I think for me, it's how you're brought up and what you're told and taught and fed by those people who are responsible for shaping you as a baby and a child. And you see it in kids everywhere. I've got 2 wee grandsons, as you know, and another one on the way. And you can see that they are the result of what they're being taught and shaped by their parents. So if you've grown up, as I say, I was grown up, my parents would both describe themselves as atheists. I was brought up to think of God as a man.
Yes.
Who was judgmental.
Powerful.
And powerful,
all powerful.
Omnipotent, completely all powerful. And that there was heaven and hell, and you had to behave, because if you didn't, you died, you were going to go to hell, and that would be eternal damnation. And so, I mean, as a child, that's absolutely terrifying to think of that. Whereas my wee grandsons, I try to at the moment, they're exploring the sacred through the natural world. Now, I don't say that, come on, let's go out to the park and explore the sacred. We go to the park.
With their monster trucks.
Yeah, with their monster truck, exactly. We go to the park and we just talk about how plants grow and the trees, and are they talking to each other? And I wonder what they're saying to each other. And we talk about the moon and the sun. But
this is what you do, and this is, you tell, well, this is what we do, is it's all about storytelling. And going back to the whole God that we are conditioned to understand as small people, not so much now, but in our sort of generation, if you just strip it away and just read the stories that have been written, they are the most beautiful stories.
Beautiful.
Some are a little bit harsh, but because they've been twisted over time. But if you just go back and just see the storytelling of kindness, of wonder, of seeing something greater,
And the metaphors.
and I think we lose sight of that because we get blinded by the fear of something.
And it's so divisive. So many people are afraid to, they always say don't talk about religion or politics, right? Because it can be so triggering. I hate that word triggering, but it's so triggering for people, and it ends up an argument rather than a debate.
Well,
or a discussion.
Exactly. So I come from a family of publicans. So we, as a family, we have businesses, pubs in Ayrshire. And that is the rule. In every pub in Ayrshire, you do not talk football because at the end of the day, that's religion. There's nothing, I'm sorry. And you don't talk politics. And because it literally can escalate.
Quickly.
So sitting here having a conversation about spirituality may put some people, if they're watching this, on the back foot. But I think what we're trying to say is we're not anything. We're still learning. We're so aware of everything around us and just grateful for that.
Yeah.
So when did you have that sort of moment where you thought, okay, so what can I do with this training and this belief and this that I've got?
Well, as you had said, I'd started up celebrant training in Scotland, and I was training mainly funeral celebrants in the practical aspects of being a celebrant. And you came on that training. It was very intense, very full on and great. And I think I've trained maybe between 70 and 80 celebrants in Scotland and really, really enjoyed it. But the spiritual aspects of ceremony were becoming more and more prevalent in my life. And I was realising, when I first went out to do funeral ceremonies, and you'll know this, any celebrant will know this, you go out to do a funeral ceremony and you're told by the funeral director, non-religious. It's a non-religious ceremony. And then you go and you sit with them and you're getting all this beautiful information about the deceased life, etc. And they'll say, oh, and by the way, we want a hymn. Or we want a prayer. And initially, I just would not question that. I would just say, okay. But I would think to myself, is that not a wee bit odd? That's a non-religious ceremony, but they want a prayer. And so I would just put it in. So it would be this completely non-religious, non-spiritual, so no spiritual support in it, but this prayer dumped in the middle. And it just felt so disconnected to me. And it only came through I've done well over 1,000 funeral ceremonies now. It just came through experience where one day that happened and I found myself saying, can I just ask you about that? Because you've said...
Did you go...
can I just ask you about that? Because you've said you want a non-religious ceremony and yet you're having a hymn or a prayer. And it was the best thing I ever did because it opened up all these beautiful conversations about what the person, they maybe wouldn't have used the language believed, but that's what transpired. And we'd have these beautiful conversations about what that meant was they didn't want anything boring or pious or talking about a God that they didn't recognise. But it certainly did not mean that they wanted a ceremony devoid of spiritual support.
And that's exactly the one where I kind of feel like I've come into it and I'm more comfortable with exploring spirituality, is working with these wonderful families. And it's those moments where they go, oh, and I just knew that my granny was there when my grandpa, I knew she was waiting for him. And so they say they don't want any spiritual content. They don't, it's because we've been brought up to not know a difference.
Yeah.
So religion, because people get, oh no, it's not religious, I don't want religion. Yeah. You think, okay, but beautiful words, perfect, describes everything, spiritual support.
Yeah.
To me, that encompasses it all. And that is what we can, and a lot of the poetry that you pick up or that you write or the way that you write has a lot of that coming through. Whether I found that I was doing it unintentionally, I didn't know that I was putting all that in, and it was sort of feeling right. And I don't think I've ever, I think possibly I've maybe had 2 families maybe have come back and said, oh no, that's not quite right
The
there.
language is not quite right.
And it's not, we're not going in there all, and there's something greater, and it's
In the
all
presence of God.
Yeah, nothing.
But no,
nothing
there's
like
anything
that.
wrong with that. That's absolutely fine.
Absolutely, but we're not going in there like that. It's almost like, I mean, I don't, my words of committal, depending on my families, tend to be almost like a spiritual prayer anyway.
And families are really connected to
they
it.
love it.
It brings depth.
Yeah.
It brings the...
And comfort.
Yes, it brings the depth and the solemnity of a religious ceremony without the religion.
Absolutely. And we're not, this is absolute, we're not banging religion. That's it.
No.
We're not, it's basically what we're saying is that it's okay. It's okay to believe in something greater. You're not, going to be, I think that's the thing. People, we think you're going to take piss out of you. And people aren't, because...
Sometimes they do. I've had people in my family like,
I
she's
know.
away with that spiritual shite again.
I know. Yeah, no, absolutely. My boys are like that. She's just a weirdo. That's fine. But that's okay.
I'll take it.
So when did you sort of start going, right, what can I do with this now?
The one thing that always irked me was the kind of tagline of the One Spirit Foundation, which is that we serve all faiths and none.
Okay.
Right? And I found that difficult because we don't, as Rites and Rituals, want to be all things to all people. I didn't want to build a community where we're saying, yeah, you can have religious, you can have non-religious, you can have spiritual, you can have humanist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that felt like to me, all faiths and none. Now, maybe that's me completely getting it wrong, and the One Spirit Foundation would say, no, that's actually not what we mean by it, and that's absolutely fine. But that and none kind of irked me because I wanted to build a community that was a spiritual community, so people who feel connected to something, and they are drawn to that work, the work that we do, and whether that's just to explore spirituality and through ceremony and ritual, or whether to have ceremony. And so I started to think about putting together a community that was very clear about what they were. Very clear about what we are. We are a group of people who feel connected to something. And that might be God. That might be a Christian God. It might be nature. Mm-hmm. It might be just, if you're a Star Wars fan, the Force.
The Force.
Because the people that know me know I'm a huge geek. It's the same thing. That's the idea that there is this life force around us.
We're being held by something
We're
greater.
being held by something greater.
Does it need a name?
It doesn't need a name, because I don't know, but I feel it. It's not a belief. It's a knowing.
I think that's the thing, is that there's no rule book. And I think that's where religion gets caught up, because there's rules. But as long as we strive to lead a life of goodness, and don't get me wrong, if somebody came to Rites and Rituals with a bad attitude, then we know we're not right, for them, and they're definitely not right for us. It's about a feeling of being held by something good and, becoming the best version.
Powerful.
And
powerful. So it touches upon all these things, and like manifesting, so being able, what you put out, you get back. I'm a big believer in that. This idea that the sacred is always walking beside you, always has your back. We had a conversation about that this morning. So it touches on all these elements that you find in modern day, some people say pop psychology or modern day spirituality, but at its heart, it's a community of like-minded people who feel connected to something beyond what they experience through their everyday sensory experience, and that want to explore that.
But you didn't wake up and go, oh, I know, let's do rites and rituals. This has
No.
been going on for the last few years to get
5,
to
6
this.
years. It's evolved. It's been
defined.
called 100 different things. It just never felt right till it felt right. And then that was the time to say, okay, let's put this together. Let's put it out there. See if people are drawn to it. And of course, I'm a celebrant. I'm a ceremonialist. So the idea was that it would become a group of ceremonialists that would offer ceremonies to people who also feel connected to something beyond themselves. So very much spirituality at its heart. And when I did that, I came to you and said...
You up for it, doll?
So what's your path to this been?
Well, it's a long kind of process. And you look back at your life, and even growing up, I mean, we were turfed out every Sunday morning to go to Sunday school, basically because, mum and dad didn't want to be bothered with us on Sunday morning. They weren't going to church. I wasn't brought up in a religious household at all. In fact, anything, my father was, I would say, atheist. But as I sort of went away, I went and studied music and drama down in London. And when you go to drama school, there's your twirlies. So there's all of us who can oh, this is great. And then there's the actors who are just a little bit deeper. And there's a couple of them and you just look at and you go, oh, I wish I was them. Because they're just they seem so together and grounded, and they burn incense in their rooms and they smoke a lot of weed, and you're just like,
I have never smoked weed.
I know, and I'm not good. I'm not good with that either. But they just seemed and would wear kind of really kind of cool, floaty clothes and be all actory. I thought, oh, that's nice, quite fancy. That's quite, but I could never get my head into it because I was never cool enough.
Yeah, I don't believe that.
I'm just getting into my coolness now. So I never really did anything with it. But then I think I always felt there was something. I always had a fascination with the paranormal, say. And I was always a little bit kind of liked kind of ghost stories and things of, all that kind of stuff. Not scary stuff, but interesting, real stories and stories. So long story short, when I came back to Scotland and had my 2 wee boys. Oh yeah, no, because I've got married. Not married anymore. Got married. But the only reason I didn't have anything, we just got married in the church. Now, the reason I got married in the church was because I really wanted the good photos because it was a really nice church.
Yes, and that still happens today.
And secondly, I was marrying a Catholic. I was brought up a Protestant, but not really practicing. But my ex-husband's family had an incredibly strong faith. And even though I grew up in the west of Scotland, I was never involved in that sort of Catholic Protestant different school. They never really came across that. But his family were English, so they were not west of Scotland either. But very, and I found it fascinating. I was really interested because I'd never been surrounded by churchy folk. So I would go to a couple of, Mum, I'd go to a couple of their services down, when I was with them, and I found that whole, the rituals that they would put in place. Yeah. And I mean, it was scary, but it was quite fascinating, and the words they would say. And that was my first really kind of, oh, this is kind of deep stuff. I knew it wasn't for me, but I really liked that feeling of being part of something that was kind of greater. So anyway, we got married, and we actually had Father Edward came and did the homily for the ceremony, and it was really beautiful. But that was it. And then I had the kids, and I thought, oh, I better get them christened. Now, I wasn't even christened. So before I get married, I had to go and get christened as well.
Oh, yes, of course you would, yeah.
So I thought, I'm in this, obviously, I'm now a child of God. This is my new path. But nothing was really, it wasn't working. I would go to take the boys to the church on the Sunday, and, they had church play, and it was lovely. I really enjoyed it. And the community aspect, because it was in Calendar, so it was a beautiful little community I was living in. But nothing was really connecting. And it was kind of strange. I knew I was starting to mix. I moved further out into the country, into a place called Balquhidder, which something we'll talk about is known to be a thin place. I knew when in fact, I've got the goosebumps the minute I even mentioned that area. It's like entering a different world, and you can almost feel the air change. And I felt a connection to the land up there. I don't know what it does, but it like feeds your soul. So I knew there was I look back, I didn't know what was happening at the time, but I look back and I knew there was things stirring. There was people I was speaking to, people I started to hang out with, a few folk who were completely out there, loved them. But I knew there was something was going on. I started to think about my ancestral line. I'm very drawn to my ancestors. I feel like they're all sort of holding me in some way, and not just like, I do feel my great-grandmothers are with me, but I'm thinking your ancestral line that you have no idea of, whether they're blood or not. There is some sort of people who are not people, because I believe what you're saying, we're not in body form. So things didn't work out with the marriage. End of the day, moved back home to Troon with my two boys, and I was very lucky because my parents helped me back into work because of the businesses, but that's just not for me. I'm a terrible business person. But through that, I had to go to a funeral. Obviously, when, some of our customers, you do your bit as the business owner, you go to their funeral, whatever. I went to this, just the crematorium, and it's a terrible thing to say, but you're just like, oh, show face. Just show face because it's the right thing to do. He's a good customer, and I didn't know him, And I sat at the back, and this chap at the front started telling a story. And I hadn't been to many funerals, to be fair. I was engaged immediately because he was a storyteller. And to me, that was fascinating because there was no, now is Sam such and such, and just it's almost like insert name
through
here.
the motions kind of thing. Yeah.
He took me on a journey, and I really felt that I knew that person. Isn't that a beautiful thing?
It's just gorgeous.
It was beautiful. Everybody's got a story.
Such a skill.
It is such a skill, and I came away thinking, that's such a skill.
I want to be able to do that.
I want to be able to do that, but I didn't have a Scooby-Doo. Dipped my toe in, looked about. First thing, you go to the Humanist Society, because there didn't seem to be any. I didn't know what he was. I didn't obviously approach him and say, "Who are?" I now know who he is actually, and he's a brilliant celebrant, and I obviously have told him that he's inspired me. But I went to the Humanist Society and looked at courses, and spoke to a lady on the phone, and again, it didn't feel right. I didn't know why, because I still didn't really understand.
You didn't know what you were looking for?
I didn't know what I was looking for.
Yeah. But we're so familiar, that word humanist or humanism is so familiar with us.
Well, I think I'd probably said to my mum, I'd say, well, that would be humanist, because there didn't seem to be any other. But then I saw this word celebrant. I thought, well, what's that all about? Looked into that and all these courses down in England, and I thought, well, I can't really get away from the boys and all that kind of stuff. And then we were coming into COVID, so I had to stop work, and I had to suddenly listen to what the voices were speaking to me. And I thought, this is my time to start looking into something a bit bigger. My boys were getting a bit older. I thought, I don't know what this is about. I don't even know where you came into the scenario. I've no idea. All I know
my
is
face popping up somewhere talking.
I've no idea. I always feel like I never get. People talk about getting like, a slight nudge from spirit, or a gentle guidance. I don't, because I don't listen. So I just get a bloody great kick up the arse for spirit.
Yeah. I think we've all been there.
So it takes a
Where
lot.
we ignore the whispers
Yes.
for a long time
And they
until
just get
Spirit's like, right,
shoved.
yeah.
And there you are. I think I must have emailed, and I think within that day you got back to me, and you were like, yeah, let's meet tomorrow on Zoom.
I can't even remember that. That's terrible.
No,
But
I
saying that, I
can.
can't remember what I was doing last week. Never mind.
It's changed my
I know
life,
that's
Lindy.
it,
It's
I
a
know.
moment of my
I
life.
remember you on the course. I remember you on the course. And I remember you were very good.
Well, thank you. But it was a moment that changed.
And when I say sorry,
everything.
very good, I mean real. You were real. You weren't trying to be something you weren't. You weren't. I could see you weren't just doing it because you thought it was an easy gig and you were going to make loads of money. I could see that you'd really thought about this, the whole idea of coming into something new. And I remember you telling me about that funeral. And so you came to it knowing what a big responsibility it is.
But I didn't know it was going to be the beginning or the ongoing journey, spiritual journey that I know that I had been on since the moment I took my first breath.
Yeah.
It was an opportunity and thinking, well, it was a bit like, well, I really like that work. I have skills. I know I can speak. I can stand up in front of public. I've got those basic skills. And the storytelling and writing, I mean, that was just a joy, to listen to people. But it wasn't until I started working alongside you a little bit more that I started to think, oh, there is much more to this. Because I think and I think this is what a lot of people in this, we touched on earlier in the spirituality, you don't feel worthy of being spiritual because it's like, oh, that's what grown-ups do. That's what, ministers and all these higher powers, and I'm not good enough to be like that. Going back to college,
I'm not special
cool
enough.
kids, looking at all the cool, oh God, they're really cool. I can't, But we're all on it together. And it's such a beautiful moment. And then you and I started doing bits of work with other celebrants as well. And I didn't realise then, because I thought, oh God, this woman's got it all together. She
knows different now.
I know I don't. No, but you do have that wonderful way of making people feel held. And I knew that I was safe with you, and I knew that you wouldn't laugh at me. I wanted to be in your gang.
My goodness, there's not very many people say that. Well, there's loads of celebrants say that, but
and
that's so lovely to hear. That's so lovely.
Honestly, I mean, this is not. I mean, I suppose it is an opportunity to sort of blow smoke up your arse, but it's you didn't know the impact that you had on my life, and that you have had on my life and other people. I know that, and you're an inspiration in this world, not just as a brilliant ceremonialist and writer and speaker, but also the fact that you are so open to bring people on this journey with you. And I'm really proud to be part of
There's
that.
that tenor. And that's part of being on a spiritual journey is about being vulnerable, right? And being able to show your vulnerability. I'm not good at being vulnerable. I am so not. And I know where it comes from. It comes from my childhood, and we can go back and have a whole thing about that. I'm not good at being vulnerable. I'm not good at being vulnerable, but I'm trying. I think I'm getting a wee bit better. So when you're saying all these nice things, it's lovely, but I'm like, please stop it.
I know. But then we're all like that.
Because people will think, oh, she's up her own. But I'm not. I'm actually, when you get to know me, I'm not like that. I'm not like that. Or I try not to be like that.
But that's exactly what you've just said to me. Is what just now is what I've said. What am I trying to say here? As I do this all the time, don't I? Basically, take it.
I know. No, I'm taking it, and I'm very grateful for it.
You make me feel, and the people that we work with, and people in Rites and Rituals. It is a collaboration. Initially, I was like, oh gosh, she wants me to be part of this. Oh my God!
Because you're amazing and you're lovely and you're. You
I
bring
know-
so much to this work.
But it is that lovely feeling that we are building, and when I say we, not just Lindy and I, the community that we're building together, that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not about Lindy Irving, this is her thing.
No. No, it's very important
It's
to me
very important
yeah.
that it's not.
And there is leadership
Yes.
within Rites and Rituals.
But
There has to be
that's
leadership,
experience, though.
but there's no hierarchy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's due to experience. More to, not spiritual hierarchy, more working as a ceremonialist,
Yeah.
because it's about, we obviously have to train people, you know, the nuts and bolts of being a celebrant.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we would never tell anybody how to lead their lives or what their journey should be.
No.
Because I think I should get a tenner every time I say journey.
I know. You should one of those wee banks, you know, that you get
Yes.
like swear
be.
cans and things. We should get a spiritual one. Spiritual as shit, and you just put a tenner in every time you say the word journey or
So back to
holding space.
Yes.
But I was just going to say that's one of the things that made me a bit uncomfortable with the Rev Lindy. This idea that if you've been ordained, if you're a minister or you're in that kind of position within any kind of church, that you're the conduit for
Yes,
God,
everything
for the
comes
sacred.
through
So
you.
everything has to come through you and then out to people. And I was very uncomfortable with that because everybody can have a direct relationship with the sacred. Everybody has a direct relationship with the sacred. You don't need somebody else to feed that through to you. It's between you and your God, whatever that might be. And so I was getting more and more uncomfortable with that. And now that we've started Rites and Rituals, so if we think back to that Zoom training, 6 years ago or something, who would have known?
No.
6 years later, we've been making a podcast about Rites and Rituals Scotland, which is a community.
And it's had many incarnations. Is that the right word?
Incarnations, yeah.
Why Rites and Rituals? How did it come?
Because, oh my goodness, so it was at Sacred Scotland at one point.
Sacred Scotland, I quite liked that.
Yeah, no, it was nice. It was nice. I knew I wanted Scotland to be in there because we live in such a beautiful spiritual landscape. I'm very fortunate. I was listening to an audiobook this morning and it was somebody talking about Orkney and the beautiful standing stones, the different standing stones up there. And he was saying, I'm lucky to have visited, I can't remember how many temples all over the world, but the stones of Stinnes are the ones that seduce you more than any other. And I'm also lucky that I've got to visit some of these beautiful sacred sites all over the world, and there's nowhere more sacred and has more thin places that we'll talk about another time than Scotland. So definitely wanted to bring Scotland into that. My own ceremony brand is I do ceremonies, but the Scottish I. So there's this Scottish theme runs through everything I do. I'm super proud of my Scottish roots, my Ayrshire roots. I just love it. I love everything about Scotland and the beautiful traditions we have. So wanted that in there, but wanted this idea of ceremony and rituals. And so after much thought and writing different things and scoring them out, I came up with Rites and Rituals Scotland.
I mean, and I think it's all encompassing, really, because it doesn't. I think even if we go back to the was it Sacred Ceremonies Scotland, I think why that didn't necessarily land so much because it almost felt a little bit hierarchy again. That kind of become the sacred, which was what we all believe in, the sacred.
Yeah.
But Rites and Rituals, it's strong, but it says what it is on the tin.
And it felt right.
It's right.
I'm a big believer of going with your intuition, listening to your gut. And so it was only when my gut said it was the right time to kind of launch it, and it was only when my gut said that's right. That landed intuition-wise in a way that the others hadn't. And that's where we are. We have Rites and Rituals Scotland, which is a community.
It is a community, and it's now...
And it's growing.
And it's recognised by the Registrar General Scotland.
It is, to conduct legal marriage ceremonies here in Scotland.
Which is a huge honour.
It is very much of a huge honour. and we're growing. We're training our first ceremonialists at the minute, 4 ceremonialists, and their training will actually be completed by next weekend. And so it's been lovely. It's been a very organic journey to get here, and we're combining ceremony and all the different beautiful ceremonies that we get to do, which are the idea is that we don't just want to focus on weddings and funerals, because that's the easy bit. There are so much more potential and opportunity in our everyday lives to bring in ceremony and ritual, whether it be to mark one of these beautiful milestones, a baby being born, coming of age, a graduation, a retirement, or whether it just be everyday rituals.
Well, I think that's what is interesting, is the fact that we don't know that we do our own wee rituals every single day.
Every day.
You know, the simplicity of making your cup of coffee in a particular way to sort of start your morning is a ritual in itself. I think we have to embrace these words and not be afraid of them. Because if I say to families, could we do a little candle ceremony at the beginning? And they'll, most people, oh, that'd be lovely.
That'd be lovely, yeah.
If I say candle ritual, they go, oh, yeah. Because if you're outside the church, if you're doing rituals, then you're doing witchcraft.
Yeah, that's true. That's
so you're
true.
like, but everything that the church does, all those beautiful rituals that they have, they are rituals. Every culture has the most beautiful rituals. I think as we're afraid of these terms, and just to bring them in, to make them normal, is writing a birthday card is a ritual in itself, because you're honouring that person and you're sending them, my mum puts when my sons open their birthday card, there's always a little coloured paper clip before they open the card. They know there's like 20 quid in there.
Yeah.
That's a little ritual in itself. Because my younger son will go, oh, great, there's a
paper clip.
There's a paper clip. It's these beautiful little things that we do in our daily lives that we don't necessarily realise that we're doing.
And there's so much more that we could do. So my boyfriend broke up with me last night. I'm absolutely brokenhearted. Yeah, we could open a tub of Ben and Jerry's and binge something on Netflix, but we could also sit with a candle and a piece of paper or a beautiful journal, and we could write down our thoughts and our feelings. We can write down what we're angry about. We could write down all the things we're glad to see the back of, and then we can
let them go.
We can rip it up. We can, if we've got a fire and we can do it safely, we can set fire to them.
Not the boyfriend.
Not the boyfriend. Well, we are for Ayrshire, so there's so and something happens when you bring your intention to something and you sit and reflect on it, and you do this act that points past itself. It's helping you to let go. It's helping you to move forward. It's helping you. Something magical happens. So there we are, our first Rites and Rituals podcast. We were worried we weren't going to have anything to talk about. My God, we've been talking for...
Hello.
Oh, we're just coming up in an hour.
No.
We've done it perfectly, so it's going to be an hour-long podcast.
Okay, brilliant. Well done.
Yeah, so thank you so much for anybody that's watching. As we said at the start, future podcasts. Well, if anybody's got any ideas for topics, we are well open to it. We've been asking our students for topics, but anything to do with ceremony, ritual, spirituality, being a celebrant, anything at all along those lines, we are more than happy to chat about.
Especially the ritual, we can, talk you through certain rituals to sort of start bringing them into your everyday life.
Rituals. Yep.
So all that kind of stuff is all going to be part of the podcast moving forward.
As we go on. And we're going to bring on other celebrants.
Yes.
So we're going to get a humanist on, an agnostic celebrant on, we'll get an independent celebrant on, because there's so many different types of celebrants, and they can introduce us to what it is they do and how it differs from...
Because there's room for everybody.
There is room for everybody. But we're spiritual celebrants. So whenever we are holding space in ceremony, we are doing it with the absolute knowing that that space is being held by something else, whether it's just the beauty of the natural world, or whether it's God or the universe, the sacred, the divine, or if you're a Star Wars fan, the Force. It's all welcome.